So what makes a good training partner? If maybe right now you're training on your own, on your Todd, you're popping off to the gym, you're throwing a few weights around, you're bench pressing, you're pulling, you think like you're training hard, but could you train a little bit harder if you had someone there with you? If you had someone to push you to that next level, to get those 1 or 2 extra reps out, maybe when you're flagging at the end of a workout, to just keep pushing you and pushing you and pushing you, could you actually get more out of your training? Now, if the answer is, yeah, maybe I could, what actually makes a good training partner? Because if you get a shitty one, then you might as well train on your own. And likewise with a spotter. If you get a good spotter, worth their weight in gold. If you get a bad spotter, well, you might as well just freaking throw the dice with that barbell because it could be crashing down to your chest at any moment in time. Now, this is the topic of today's episode of the podcast. But before we launch into all of that, let me say, if you are watching this on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Let's get this podcast really growing and expanding on YouTube. That would be awesome. And if you are listening on a podcast platform, also a rating and a review would be absolutely awesome as well. And as usual, there's a bunch of links in the show notes where you can grab some free information, free calorie guides, free calorie calculator, and maybe you want to go over to imparadisefitness.com and check out some of my training and nutrition articles for more information that you need in order to kickstart your way to that leaner, healthier life. But for now, let's get back to our topic for today, which is all about finding that perfect training partner. The first thing that I think you need to think about is your goals. Now, you want to make sure that you are pretty much aligned on your goals with your training partner. There's no good training with someone, let's say, for example, a lot of people go down the route of couples who train together, stay together. Might be true, but often couples who train together have completely opposing goals that don't really work well together, and you'll probably end up arguing and splitting up. So that's maybe the real truth for most people. So find someone, if you can, who's got very, very similar goals to you. If it's a case of, let's say you're a dude and you want to build up your upper body, so you want bigger pecs, arms, whatever, make sure you've got a training partner who wants to do the same. Otherwise, the exercises you choose or you want to choose or the set number of sets you're going to do per body part is just going to be at odds, and it's not really going to work for either of you. So you want to make sure that you have got this alignment on goal from the beginning and you're both bought into that process so that you both understand like this is definitely going to get us to our goal, whatever that is, whether you are female who wants to build glutes or shoulders, or whether you want a little bit more back development, something like that. Whether you're a dude, maybe you just want to really focus heavily on legs. Again, get a training partner who's really bought into that process from the outset, because if you are butting horns like two bulls, then it's really going to pay. Yeah, it's really not going to pay off in the long run, and that's going to crash and burn quite quickly. And like I said before, save your relationship. If you haven't got a similar goal to your partner, training together might not be the best thing. Obviously, you can be in the gym at the same time. If that's motivational to both get you there, great. But maybe be comfortable with divergent goals and with divergent use of different equipment and divergent workouts. You don't have to do the same thing. It's not really this Instagram picture perfect scenario that you have to try and create. Number 2 is you want some consistency. You don't want a flaky training partner, some motherfucker who's just going to let you down every single time you're supposed to hit the gym. Or you don't want that awkward fucker who always wants to train arms. You've got a set program, you've got a set workout, you rock up and he's like, oh yeah, dude, don't feel like it, man. Could we just do arms? And then you go, oh yeah, whatever. Next day you come back, oh yeah, dude, I don't feel like legs today. Can we just do arms? And then you just end up with an arm program. Nobody wants or needs an arm program. So make sure you've got someone, male or female, again, it doesn't really matter, the same rules apply, that is consistent, is going to show up at the right time and be consistent with their effort at the same time as well. And you also want to make sure that you are consistent with a training partner over a period of time. You don't want to, say, have a training partner for a month and then switch to another one, and then you're consistent for a couple of weeks and then you try and switch to another one, or there's a gap for a couple of months or whatever. You want to see if you can get consistency for a number of weeks, months, and maybe even years in order for you to build up a good relationship with that training partner, so that they know the way that each other train, they know how to spot them correctly, they know when to push them, how to push them, what you respond well to. All of these various different things are things that are learned over the course of time. So this like bro or broette relationship develops over the course of time. There's a communication aspect that you work on in the gym over the course of all the workouts that you do together. So make sure you've got those goals that really match together, and two, that you're consistent, both consistent with each other and with the workouts that you're doing. Number 3 is communication. So like I said before, this relationship building process is going to be achieved through lots and lots of communication. Now, by communication, I mean, like, for example, you might need to teach your training partner how to spot you correctly. One of you may be slightly more advanced than the other. That's usually the way these things work out. So you're going to have to teach that person, like you sometimes when you get a spotter, let's say you're doing bench press, is they literally spot every fucking rep and they're almost pulling it off you when actually you could do 8 reps on your own. You need help with the last 2. You've got to communicate that. You've got to communicate when maybe they're providing too much assistance, maybe when they're not providing enough and you think you're about to die. Again, you've got to start to communicate and not be frightened to just talk about, dude, fucking hell, stop doing that. Stop fucking standing over my face with your ball sack and trying to teabag me while I'm bench pressing. These are things that are not good and should be communicated. So think about that as you go through this process. You're thinking about, okay, we've got goals that converge together on the same point. We're moving in the same direction. We are also thinking about being consistent. So we're kind of doing the same thing. We're being consistent with our times, the amount of times we work out and all that sort of good stuff. And then you're communicating with, over the course of time, about what works, how to spot, how to train, and so that all these things become automatic over the course of your training career, let's say. Not career, you're not getting paid for it, are you? When it comes to spotting technique, now this is quite nuanced. I'm going to give you some rough guidelines, but it really depends on the exercise that you're doing. The spotting technique for that exercise could be very, very different, and the rule that I say to you might not apply to every exercise in that scenario. So sometimes it's going to have to be using a little bit of common sense, using a bit of a practical approach, and again using that communication element, because there are probably multiple different ways you could spot a certain exercise. One might work well for the guy or girl that you're training with, and vice versa, one might not. So again, it's about that communication to say, hey dude, that spot really didn't work for me that way. Can we try it a different way? Etc, etc, etc. So you've got to think about that. Now, one of the spotting techniques, let's talk about 2 different spotting techniques then. One of them would be side lateral dumbbell raises, let's say, as one example. Now, the tendency when someone is spotting this particular exercise is to put the hands underneath the elbows and kind of give a lift up. But actually, this can be counterintuitive, because our natural tendency is when we feel a particular, like a pressure point on our body or something touches that, our natural instinct is to push into that. So if you are actually supporting from the bottom, actually you might find that people push down into it, which is actually counterintuitive to the direction that you want to go in. So whilst you're pushing up, they're actually pushing down into your hands. So the better way to potentially spot that is to actually put hands on the top of the arm, so they got something to push into. So not necessarily your job is not necessarily to just lift that weight up for them. It's to create that sensation. Maybe that's the wrong word, sensation, but you're creating that kind of point at which they're going to push into that weight to actually start to lift it up. That would be one way to look at it. Another one would be, let's say you look at leg extensions. So leg extensions, when you are working with the pad and you're lifting that weight up, sometimes the tendency is for people to spot the actual pad itself. So they pull the pad. But what you're actually doing is pulling that pad off of the person's shin, so off of their leg. And that means you are lightening the load on the actual muscle, and you are kind of just taking away from the effectiveness of that exercise. So a better way to do that might be to actually spot from the heels as well. Again, these various different things work for some people, they might not work for others. So you've got to find that little bit of technique that actually works for each individual person. When you go into things like bench press and so on and so forth, I think the general rule there is the bar should always be moving. When you get into those situations where someone is struggling with the bar near their chest and you see spotters just screaming at them to say, lightweight baby, lightweight, and actually it's not a lightweight, it's a fucking heavyweight and it's about to crash into my chest, you bastard. Actually, that weight should be moving. Anywhere where I think that a weight is just stopped, completely stopped and not moving, the job of the spotter is to make sure that's one fluid motion that's keeping moving throughout that entire rep. So keep those things in mind when you are a spotter. And again, when you are the trainee, give your spotter some direction and say, I need more assistance when it comes to that point, and so on and so forth. That's what builds that relationship that then makes the training more effective. So a good training partner is someone who is aligned to your goals, is consistent, and is someone who you can communicate with. And then when it gets to the spotting thing, again, it's exercise specific, it's person specific, but be prepared to work at that as well. So hopefully this gave you some insight into what a good training partner can look like, because let's face it, if you're training alone, I guarantee you can work harder. You can always train harder with someone more so than you can on your own. You might say, Simon, I can train to the absolute max on my own. I guarantee you, with a good spotter, you can train harder. That is a fact. And if you can find a good training partner, great, go for it. But don't settle for a shitty one, because you might as well train on your own. So if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, please come and let me know. Visit me on Instagram at iron_paradise_fitness. You can drop me a DM, maybe tagging me in your Instagram stories, whatever you choose. And don't forget to click the link in the show notes below to grab all of that free shizzle that I talked about at the beginning of the episode. But for now, all I'm going to say is thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.